One professional basketball league has continued for nearly 3 decades, despite losing tens of millions of dollars in many years and relying heavily on financial support from its larger parent league.
It is a bureaucratic issue that has nothing to do with playing basketball, apparently, and even though it's obviously relevant to the sport. So she's not interested. She doesn't want to talk about it. Watch.
I think for us, it's not really a discussion we really have in our locker room. I think it's for leagues and the governing bodies to work with their athletes to find solutions, but our focus is on basketball, and that's what we talk about and how we can get wins, and obviously we didn't do that tonight, so we need to find an area to improve in that way.
Do you have any, reaction to the...
I just answered for you.
All right.
Now, some of Caitlin Clark's fans have tried to defend this rather staggering display of cowardice. They say that, well, Clark is just trying to stay focused on the game. Oh, really? Then why was she doing interviews last year talking about white privilege and the need to elevate black women? Was that about staying focused on the game? No, we all know that she's afraid, and so she's not saying what is obviously true.
Throughout that period, it has not produced a sustained record of profitability. For much of its existence, the league operated as a subsidized sports property with limited mainstream attention. Games were often played in partially filled arenas, while television coverage was frequently assigned to less prominent broadcast windows.
They call that a foul on Sophie Cunningham. She's got 14 of her teeth on the ground. That's a defensive foul. And they reviewed it for a hostile act. Yeah, Sophie's saying, hey, I just got my jaw broke. Is this a political stance? You just took 14 of my teeth. Quiet, Sophie, no big deal. A defensive foul. Let's watch this one more time. This is on Sophie? No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. Elbow to the jaw to 14 teeth gone. That's offensive, bruh. Yeah, Sophie, you got your face knocked in. We see it.
So so I guess the foul is that Sophie Cunningham threw her face into the other player's elbow. She fouled the player's elbow with her face. And the instant replay review really sells it. As Portnoy says, it's a very sick league. These people are perverse.
Its audience remained relatively small, and its commercial position depended largely on continued institutional support rather than strong independent revenue. That situation changed when a highly prominent college player entered the professional league and brought a substantial audience with her. Interest rose quickly, arenas began selling out, television ratings increased sharply, and viewers who had rarely or never watched women's professional basketball began following the league. Her arrival created a level of commercial attention the organization had struggled to generate during the previous decades. The league had acquired a player capable of changing its financial prospects. She attracted viewers, ticket buyers, sponsors, and extensive media coverage. Her popularity offered the league an opportunity to move away from long-term dependence on outside financial support and toward a more sustainable commercial model. Under ordinary circumstances, a league would be expected to protect and promote an athlete who had produced that level of growth. It would make her central to its marketing, recognize her contribution to rising interest, and ensure that the environment around her supported the league's broader business objectives. Instead, her arrival was accompanied by visible tension involving players, media figures, and sections of the league's existing audience. Veteran players who had spent years competing with limited national attention suddenly found themselves operating in a league dominated by coverage of one rookie. She received a large share of the headlines, endorsement opportunities, and public interest. That imbalance created resentment among some observers and participants who believed the attention surrounding her had overshadowed the contributions of established players. The disagreement extended beyond ordinary competition for recognition. Some critics argued that the new star's popularity reflected racial, cultural, and political preferences within the broader sports audience. Rather than treating the expanded interest as a commercial benefit for the league as a whole, parts of the discussion focused on whether the player represented the identity and values that certain groups wanted the league to promote. The result was an atmosphere in which routine competition became connected to wider disputes about race, privilege, gender, and political identity. The tension was visible both on the court and in media coverage surrounding the league. As the season continued, the physical treatment of the star player became a recurring subject of public debate. She was pushed to the floor, struck by hard screens, and hit around the head during plays. Several incidents appeared to involve illegal contact, while some were not called by officials. Supporters argued that the pattern went beyond normal professional basketball and reflected targeted physical treatment. Others described it as the type of aggressive defense commonly used against highly influential players. The officiating became part of the controversy. Missed calls and inconsistent rulings were repeatedly examined through replays, social media clips, and sports commentary. Each incident added to the perception among many viewers that the league was failing to protect its most commercially important player. The media environment created a separate source of pressure. Reporters frequently asked the player about racial bias, white privilege, and the political implications of her popularity. Rather than focusing only on basketball, interviews increasingly required her to address broader social questions connected to the attention she had received. Those questions placed her in a difficult position. Any direct answer could affect relationships with teammates, other players, sponsors, media organizations, and supporters. A strong response might have satisfied one group while creating conflict with another. Her approach was to rely on carefully controlled public statements that avoided confrontation. She generally gave conventional answers developed around team performance, preparation, execution, and respect for other players. When questions moved into political or cultural territory, she declined to provide strong personal positions. Critics viewed this approach as excessive caution and argued that she had allowed media pressure to limit her willingness to speak openly. The criticism became more direct when she was asked about the participation of male-bodied individuals in women's sports. She did not offer a firm defense of restricting female competition to biological women. Instead, she avoided taking a clear public position. To her critics, the decision represented a failure to use her influence. She had become the most visible female athlete in the sport and had access to an unusually large audience. They believed that this position gave her both the opportunity and the responsibility to defend the traditional boundaries of women's athletics. Her decision to remain neutral was interpreted as an effort to protect her public image, endorsement arrangements, and professional relationships. Rather than confront a controversial issue, she chose the lower-risk approach of saying as little as possible. While the league's most prominent player avoided the debate, Sophie Cunningham took a more direct position. During a major media feature, Cunningham addressed the subject of gender regulations in women's sports. She stated that she respected and cared about other people, but believed women's sports existed for a specific reason. Cunningham argued that girls and adult women should not be required to share locker rooms or compete against male-bodied athletes. Her position was presented as a straightforward defense of sex-based competition rather than a broader philosophical argument. She treated the distinction between male and female athletic categories as a basic principle of women's sports. Her comments attracted immediate attention because many athletes had avoided discussing the issue publicly. Professional players often rely on cautious, media-approved language when addressing subjects that could produce controversy. Cunningham's statement differed because it was direct and left little uncertainty about her view. The debate developed within a league that had already spent decades operating under unusual financial conditions. A business that lost tens of millions of dollars over an extended period would ordinarily face closure or major restructuring. Professional sports leagues can survive longer under those circumstances when a larger organization is willing to provide continued financial support. For many years, the league remained outside the attention of the broader sports public. Its losses, internal disputes, and competitive issues attracted limited scrutiny because the audience was relatively small. That changed when a generational college player entered the league and brought millions of new viewers. The increase in attention changed the financial and cultural environment at the same time. Television ratings reached record levels, arenas sold out, and the league became a regular subject on national sports programs. The player's popularity did not simply increase viewership, it exposed every part of the league to a level of public examination it had not previously experienced. New viewers quickly noticed the physical nature of the competition. Hard fouls, missed calls, and repeated contact involving prominent players became major subjects of discussion. Clips circulated widely, and incidents that might once have received limited attention were examined by millions of people. Analysts disagreed over how to interpret the contact. Some described it as traditional veteran resistance to a celebrated rookie. Established players often test highly promoted newcomers and refuse to treat them as exceptional simply because they arrive with commercial attention. Under that interpretation, the physical play was part of the competitive adjustment to professional basketball. Others believed the contact was unusually frequent and reflected resentment toward the player's popularity. They argued that the league's existing players were directing frustration at an athlete who had received more attention in a short period than many veterans had received throughout their careers. The disagreement created an environment in which nearly every hard foul became part of a national argument. Routine basketball contact was no longer judged only by the rules of the game. It was analyzed for possible personal, racial, cultural, and political motivations. As scrutiny of the on-court treatment intensified, the conflict expanded into media coverage. Cunningham's comments on gender policy became a central point of disagreement. She had chosen to address an issue that many athletes and public figures preferred to avoid. Cunningham argued that maintaining female-only athletic categories was necessary to preserve the purpose of women's sports. Supporters praised her for expressing a position they believed was widely shared but rarely stated by professional athletes. Critics described her comments as divisive and inconsistent with the inclusive values promoted by the league and some of its media partners. The response from broadcasters and commentators was immediate. During live coverage, announcers referred to Cunningham's remarks and directed attention toward opposing statements from coaches who supported broader inclusion. The dispute was no longer limited to a single interview. It became part of the league's public presentation during games. Post-game press conferences also moved beyond basketball strategy and performance. Reporters asked players and coaches to state their positions on gender policy and related social issues. Questions about rotations, shooting, defense, and game preparation were joined by questions about political and cultural identity. This created a visible division within the league's audience. Traditional sports fans argued that the focus should remain on basketball and that female competition should retain established sex-based boundaries. Progressive media organizations and activists expected players and coaches to support inclusive policies and broader social movements. The league was therefore required to manage two different constituencies. One group had been attracted by the competition and by the arrival of a highly popular player. Another viewed the league as both a sports organization and a platform for social advocacy. The expectations of those groups did not always align. Attention then shifted toward the league's most prominent athlete. Many supporters expected her to support Cunningham or to state her own position. They watched for a public statement, a social media post, or any indication that she shared Cunningham's view. No such statement came. The player continued to avoid the controversy and limited her public comments to basketball. She discussed performance, teamwork, preparation, and execution while declining to enter the dispute over gender policy. For many observers, her silence carried political meaning even though she had not stated a position. Critics interpreted it as a retreat from a debate in which her influence could have been decisive. They argued that the most powerful athlete in the league was unwilling to speak when the issue involved the future of women's competition. Her defenders offered a different interpretation. They argued that one young athlete should not be expected to resolve every political conflict surrounding the league. She had entered professional basketball to compete, not to serve as the official representative for every social question affecting women's sports. Taking a public position would also create professional risks. She had major endorsement agreements, corporate partnerships, teammates with different views, and a long career ahead of her. A direct statement could damage relationships inside the locker room, create disputes with sponsors, or turn part of the league's audience against her. From that perspective, avoiding the issue was not necessarily weakness. It was a calculated decision to protect her career and remain focused on basketball. Athletes are often advised to avoid subjects that could divide their audience or distract from their professional performance. The disagreement over her silence reflects a broader conflict about the responsibilities of prominent athletes. Some supporters believe influence creates an obligation to speak, particularly when the issue directly concerns the structure of women's sports. Others believe athletes should be free to avoid political debates and should not be judged for refusing to become public activists. This conflict has developed at a critical point in the league's history. Commercially, the organization is experiencing growth that would have been difficult to imagine during earlier decades. Television audiences have expanded, attendance has increased, and investment has followed the rise in public interest. The league now has an opportunity to strengthen its financial position and reduce the long-standing dependence on subsidies. A larger audience can produce greater broadcast revenue, stronger sponsorship agreements, increased merchandise sales, and improved bargaining power. The attention surrounding its leading player has given the league access to commercial possibilities it previously lacked. At the same time, ideological disputes among players, media organizations, coaches, and supporters threaten to distract from the competition. Each physical incident is examined for motives beyond basketball. Each interview can become a test of political alignment. Each public statement is evaluated according to competing cultural standards. When that pattern continues, athletic performance receives less attention. Games become secondary to arguments about identity, representation, and social policy. Players are judged not only by what they do on the court, but also by whether their public positions satisfy particular groups. The league's leadership must therefore balance commercial growth, player relations, public expectations, and political pressure. It must protect the competitive integrity of the game while also managing a media environment that increasingly treats sports as part of a wider cultural conflict. Officiating will remain central to that challenge. When prominent players are repeatedly involved in hard contact, officials must apply the rules consistently. Failure to do so creates suspicion even when no deliberate bias exists. A league seeking broader legitimacy cannot allow viewers to believe that personal resentment or political hostility affects player safety. Media management is equally important. Reporters have the right to ask difficult questions, but the repeated conversion of sports interviews into political examinations can deepen divisions. Players who answer directly may face public attacks, while those who decline to answer may be accused of cowardice or complicity. Cunningham's decision to speak openly demonstrated the consequences of taking a firm position. She received strong support from people who agreed with her defense of female-only competition. She also faced criticism from those who believed her comments excluded or harmed others. The league's most visible player demonstrated the consequences of remaining silent. She protected herself from making a statement that could immediately alienate sponsors, teammates, or sections of the audience. At the same time, her refusal to engage disappointed supporters who expected her to defend the traditional structure of women's athletics. Neither approach removed the controversy. Direct speech intensified the disagreement, while silence produced a separate argument about responsibility and leadership. The dispute therefore continued regardless of whether individual players chose to participate. This places the league in a difficult position. Its growth depends partly on attracting a broad audience that includes people with sharply different political and cultural views. A sports organization can lose commercial momentum when viewers believe its public identity excludes them or treats their concerns with contempt. The league must also account for the views of its players and existing supporters. Many participants regard social advocacy as an important part of the organization's identity. They may resist efforts to separate basketball from political or cultural issues. The commercial success created by the new star has made these tensions more visible. Before the increase in ratings and attendance, internal disagreements could remain largely contained within a smaller audience. Record interest has removed that protection. Every conflict now unfolds before a much larger public. The player responsible for much of that growth has become central to the dispute despite her efforts to avoid it. Her popularity, background, endorsement value, and treatment on the court have made her a symbol for competing interpretations of the league. To some viewers, she represents the long-awaited commercial breakthrough that could transform women's professional basketball. To others, the concentration of attention around one athlete raises questions about which players receive recognition and why. Those competing interpretations influence how people understand on-court events. A hard foul can be viewed as ordinary competition, resentment toward a rookie, or evidence of a deeper cultural conflict. A cautious interview answer can be understood as professionalism, corporate control, or a failure of leadership. The same ambiguity applies to Cunningham's remarks. Supporters view them as a defense of fairness and the established purpose of women's sports. Critics view them as an attack on inclusion. Because the disagreement is based on conflicting principles, it is unlikely to be resolved by a single statement from a player or league official. The league's financial history adds urgency to the situation. After decades without sustained profitability, the organization now has an opportunity to convert rising attention into long-term stability. That opportunity depends on retaining new viewers, protecting star players, improving the public confidence in officiating, and preventing political disputes from overwhelming the product. Commercial growth cannot be assumed to continue automatically. Audiences attracted by one athlete may leave if she is injured, treated unfairly, or placed in an environment they consider hostile. Sponsors may also reconsider their involvement if the league becomes known primarily for controversy rather than competition. The league therefore faces a practical question about its identity. It can continue to operate as both a sports competition and a prominent platform for social causes, but doing so requires careful management of disagreement. It cannot assume that all new viewers share the political values of its established institutions. It must also avoid the opposite mistake of dismissing the beliefs held by players, coaches, and long-term supporters. The organization's challenge is not simply to choose one side. It is to maintain a professional sports league in which people with different views can compete, work, and participate without every game becoming a political confrontation. The conduct of players will remain part of that process. Physical competition is expected in professional basketball, but repeated illegal contact must be addressed. Rivalry and resentment are not unusual in sports, but they cannot be allowed to undermine safety or confidence in the league's rules. The conduct of media partners will also matter. Broadcasters can report on controversial statements without turning every game into a referendum on political identity. Their role in framing disputes can either clarify the issues or intensify division. Players will continue to make different choices. Some, like Cunningham, will speak directly on controversial subjects. Others will use controlled language or decline to comment. Those choices should be understood within the professional pressures surrounding modern athletes, including sponsorship obligations, team relationships, public scrutiny, and personal conviction. The league's leading star has made clear through her behavior that she does not intend to become the primary mediator of these disputes. She has continued to focus her public remarks on basketball and has avoided endorsing either side. That decision may preserve her commercial position, but it will not satisfy people who believe her influence carries a duty to defend women's sports. The criticism is likely to continue because her silence leaves room for both supporters and opponents to assign their own meaning to it. Cunningham's position is equally unlikely to disappear. Her comments gave public expression to concerns held by many fans who believe women's athletic categories must remain based on biological sex. The support she received shows that this view is a significant part of the league's expanded audience. The criticism she received also demonstrates that many people associated with the league reject that position. They believe inclusion should take priority and regard restrictions based on biological sex as harmful. The conflict is therefore embedded in the league's current audience and institutional culture. As the season continues, the tension shows little indication of declining. Players are adopting clearer positions on social issues, media organizations are giving those positions extensive attention, and the league's most prominent athlete remains unwilling to serve as the central political voice. The organization's future will depend not only on whether it can overcome its history of financial losses. It must also determine how to manage the collision between commercial growth, competitive integrity, social advocacy, and player identity. The league has received the audience and attention it spent decades trying to obtain. That attention has created its strongest opportunity for financial stability, but it has also exposed divisions that were easier to contain when fewer people were watching. Its success will depend on whether it can protect the game from being overwhelmed by those divisions. If every foul is treated as evidence of hidden motives, every interview becomes a political test, and every player is required to declare allegiance in a cultural dispute, basketball will become secondary. The league now has a commercially valuable product and a player capable of attracting a national audience. Preserving that opportunity will require consistent officiating, professional leadership, tolerance for disagreement, and a clearer separation between athletic competition and political confrontation. Without those measures, the growth created by record ratings and sold-out arenas may be undermined by conflict within the league itself. The central issue is no longer whether the organization can continue operating despite financial losses. It is whether it can manage its new visibility without allowing disputes over politics, gender, race, and identity to overshadow the sport that produced that visibility.